Springfield Fantasy Football. As always, I am your host at Hot BFF with 2 P's, joined from Springfield, Illinois, as always, by my co-host at 3BFF with 2 F's. Dan, how are you today?
Oh, fantastic. Just coming off of the natural high of our last episode we did with our special guest.
Yep, we have a special guest on today, Matt Hicks of the Fantasy FANalysts podcast. You guys have changed names, and it hasn't really stuck with me yet.
That was like 3 months ago, man.
Yeah, well, you get it.
But it's tough.
You can follow him at the FF_educator. Matt, where can they find your show? And what we just recorded, which is absolute gold and everybody should listen to.
Truly, and that's not even like a shameless plug. Like, that actually was probably the most fun episode that we have ever recorded. The Fantasy FANalysts podcast, we are on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, pretty much anywhere you can listen to podcasts. And yeah, go ahead and just give me a follow on Twitter, because I post a lot of different work. And I'm also starting up a new podcast as well called the Dynasty Draft Room through the Gridiron Network's Gridiron Experts Podcast Network. So you could also check them out on Apple Podcasts and check out my new podcast. The first episode will drop this week.
All right. Well, we certainly do appreciate you joining us, and absolutely check out that episode that we just recorded with them. It's the most fun I've had in 2 years. We did an episode where we compared rookies with or incoming rookies, prospects, if you will, with alcohol. And as you know, this is a very alcohol-friendly show, so be sure to check that out. As always, you can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, Untapped at BeerfieldFF, Facebook and YouTube, Beerfield Fantasy Football, where we record every episode live on YouTube. That is not Facebook, because nobody does Facebook Live anymore. You can also, during the NFL draft, you can catch our live draft episode on YouTube. We'll be live streaming the entire first round, giving you analysis of picks and pretending to know things about, players that aren't skill position players. So be sure to check that out. I'm sure we will get some special guests in for that. Today, we're talking rookie wide receivers, so we're going to go through Dan and I's top 12. Matt is here to give you a little bit different insight. I know he views some players differently than we do, so we wanted to get him on to give you a little bit of a refreshed perspective. But first, we need to find out what is fueling us today.
What's fueling Beerfield?
All right, Dan, we said we were changing the segment so we could drink whatever we want. You are the first person diving into something other than beer. What do you got?
I got E.H. Taylor's small batch. They're part of the Buffalo Trace Distillery. This is a 100 proof, 50% alcohol bourbon. And you'll hear more about it later on.
All right, Matt, are you drinking on anything? I know I don't have a cool little graphic for you, but what are you drinking on?
I am still working on a little Woodford Reserve, little in Coke action here. So had a very nice pour last episode. I might have to fill back up here.
Hopefully you do. If not, we're not doing things right.
That's right.
I am drinking Fudge from Imperial Artisan Ales. It is an Imperial Stout made with Brownies. So it's 11%, and we will give you full reviews on everything when it comes that time. Before we get into the rookies, we've got a bit of news to cover.
News.
All right, starting off, Duke Johnson was absent from the start of Browns OTAs. He's reportedly requested a trade.
Yay!
Yeah.
I want him to accept Cleveland so bad and just go somewhere that can utilize his skill set. We got a great glimpse of what that can be a couple years ago, and I hope it works.
Yeah, the fact that he's absent to me means that he does have suitors. Ogba was absent as well, and then he ended up getting traded. So I do think they were serious about trying to find a trade partner by not running him out there and getting him hurt. It's not a situation. It could be a situation where he was told to stay home. Matt, thoughts on Duke Johnson?
First off, I think this is good for fantasy, and I think it's good for Duke because legitimately this guy went from having a legitimate role on an offense to just being absolutely useless. But Doesn't this kind of remind you like the old guy that's just yelling when everybody else is happy? Like everybody in Cleveland in that locker room is probably so thrilled. They're like, look at all this talent coming in. We're going to be so good. And Duke Johnson's like, get me the F out of here, man.
Fuck these kids. I want to get off this. Get off my porch.
Get off my
Get off my
lawn.
lawn.
Get off my lawn.
I don't want your wins.
I
I don't want wins. I've been in
I
Cleveland.
want garbage time.
I was in Cleveland before wins were cool. Hipster
He's
Duke
the only
Johnson.
running back. He's the
Troopers are out
running-
there. I got to show up for them.
Hipster Duke Johnson. Bengals running back Mark Walton is facing felony charges for carrying a concealed weapon, marijuana possession, and reckless driving. He was also tased, but apparently juked the taser, as in threw it out of him and kept running. It's his third arrest this offseason, which is honestly quite impressive. He was waived Saturday afternoon. And he's done.
Finally, Mark Walton has lived up to his tape.
Yeah, being able to juke somebody. It was just
That's
a
right.
cop. Yeah, finally. The AAF has frozen all operations, folding after a whole 8 weeks. So there's been kind of infusion of some people. Jarrell Presley is a name that's been mentioned. He was their leading rusher, although he's facing a 2-game suspension already before he's ever signed to the NFL. Some cornerbacks. There's some mention that Charles Johnson might get another crack at things. Johnny Manziel was there. Garrett Gilbert, who we'll get to here in a minute, was named the league MVP, but they're dead.
Yeah, it doesn't look well for the XFL either if the AAF only lasted just a couple months.
I will say this about the XFL. I think Vincent McMahon is the AAF blows my mind that they did not have funding to at least make it one season and stand on their own 2 feet. Like, it was after the first week they were hunting funding. Vince McMahon is not going to be in that situation with the XFL. True. Also, it actually, I think, is better for the XFL that the AAF folded because that gives them a larger talent pool than trying to run 2 separate leagues concurrently, which would just deplete it completely.
I completely agree with that.
Do you know what I'm pretty upset about this? First off, I'm upset that this league folded, even though I didn't support it in any way, including I never watched a second of it. But I'm still offended. I mean, here's what I'm actually upset about. I just went to see how much it would cost for me to buy some Arizona Hotshot memorabilia now that they're not a real team anymore, and none of it's on clearance. What? Why do I still got to pay full price? Yeah.
Wow.
I should be able to get a starter hat that says Arizona Hotshots for $3. I should have to pay more in shipping than for the hat.
Man, just wait for like 50 years. That's just going to be worth so much money.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I was like, I got to buy this up.
You got to buy it now.
Some of this stuff is dope. Like, I'm a lifelong Arizona Hotshots fan. It's been 7 fantastic weeks.
I'm going to get myself a Garrett Gilbert Orlando Apollos jersey for when he's
the best 8 weeks of my life.
For when he's the NFL MVP.
Although Steve Spurrier was took multiple cheap shots at the University of Tennessee, so I'm not that upset that he doesn't have a job anymore.
Speaking of cheap shots, Aaron Rodgers hates his family, Mike McCarthy, puppies, and rookie wide receivers. That was the biggest NFL news this week, is that Aaron Rodgers is a terrible teammate.
Is this news?
No. Right? Like,
no,
it's not shocking to anybody who actually follows football, but to the people who wanted to believe that he's an angel.
And it doesn't matter. The Packers are just in turmoil, and I love it.
That's the best part about this, is that they get to slowly wither and die, hopefully.
I hope.
Can I get on a soapbox real quick? I mean,
go ahead.
Here's the thing. Yeah. Does having a quarterback that's a bad teammate and bad for team chemistry, is that like a bad thing to do? Yeah, sure. He sucks. But is this really what we're going to write like these groundbreaking articles on in the offseason? Do you know what I mean? There's so many terrible people that play in the NFL that get like 8-game suspensions, and then we're like, oh, yeah, they're fine. That wasn't even a big deal. They're like, oh, come on back. And then they're like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is a jerk. And then everyone gets upset about it.
He made fun of me.
Right.
But like,
there's legitimately people that do terrible things in the league, leave for 4 weeks, come back, and everyone's like, yeah, they're cool.
Yeah.
He said Mike McCarthy has a low football IQ.
I don't disagree at all.
I don't.
I just like seeing Rodgers get hate on. That's the only reason that I'm happy about this.
I don't even disagree with what he was doing.
Exactly.
I mean, minus the freezing rookie wide receivers out, he was just totally blackballing his couch. It's a power move.
Yeah, man.
It's a massive power move. He's like, I just got paid. I'm not leaving town. Fuck you. I'm calling the shots.
Aaron Rodgers is an alpha.
Paid, Dan.
He's an alpha.
Yep, exactly.
All right, on to some roster news. Stop me if any of this matters. The Browns signed wide receiver Rashard Higgins to a 1-year deal worth $2.02 million, and former AAF MVP Garrett Gilbert and wide receiver Damon Sheehy Giuseppe.
Bless you.
Thank you. They also waived wide receiver Ricardo Lewis.
So they're like the Jets now? Just hoard all the wide receivers?
Well, they cut one. And
I suppose.
They signed a guy that's probably going to end up being Baker Mayfield's backup in Garrett Gilbert.
That's kind of cool.
That's the notable thing here. Rashard Higgins is going to compete against Antonio Callaway and lose for the number 3 job. And I don't even know what Damon Giuseppe is. Cool name, I guess.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, cut.
He won't make the roster.
The Lions signed running back C.J. Anderson to a 1-year contract, which is probably the most notable thing that we're going to talk about.
It's John Kelly season, baby.
No. I hope it is. But they did re-sign Malcolm Brown, so.
They did. I hope it's John Kelly season. C.J. Anderson, interesting, though, in the sense that they've already came out and said they're going to try to limit Kerryon Johnson's carries. We know he's injury-plagued. C.J. Anderson could be a prime handcuff to own this season that also could find his way into some flex value.
And he won't have
go ahead, Dan.
And he won't have the high price that he had going into last year when everyone thought he'd take more from CMC.
Mm-hmm.
Also, do we know if the C.J. Anderson contract is paid per pound or if that's a flat rate?
Hey, he said he even tweeted and said he's definitely going to be in better shape than he was with the Rams. You're getting Broncos C.J. Anderson, man. Not Rams meatball C.J. Anderson. Alfred Blue is still going to be a thing. The Jaguars signed him to back up Leonard Fournette on a 1-year deal. They also signed Benny Cunningham. So two things that have been annoying to fantasy players for years. Benny Cunningham and Alfred Blue, both in Jacksonville.
Yay.
What's going on with TJ Yeldon? Like, I feel like there's something we don't know about.
He's frozen. I know.
I'm shocked that there's been no reports on anything about him.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No visits, no nothing. I want to say he's this year's C.J. Anderson, but C.J. Anderson was actually signed. So I don't know.
When Crowell got signed in Oakland, I was like, there's actually something going on with Yeldon that we don't know about.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's got to be. In Chiefs news, they re-signed wide receiver Marcus Kemp, who I didn't even know was signed in the first place, to a 1-year deal. They signed tight end Blake Snell, and they acquired defensive lineman Emmanuel Ogbah from the Browns for safety Eric Murray. Ogbah, the most noteworthy addition there. He was expendable from the Browns. He's a good pass rusher, though. Yep, that's it. That's it for that. The Raiders signed wide receiver Ryan Grant to a 1-year deal.
And he's already dropping passes.
Yep, he's not going to be a thing.
Was it 4 years, $29 million?
It was not. God, it was one year. Wide receiver Seth Roberts was signed by the Ravens after being released by the Raiders, so they still don't have a viable wide receiver.
That's not necessarily true.
We're talking about Willie Snead or Jordan Lasley.
Nobody in Baltimore is a legitimate wide receiver.
That's what I just said. They don't have a
viable. Oh, I thought you said there was.
No, I said they still don't have a viable wide receiver, which is fine because they don't have a quarterback that can throw to wide receivers in the first place.
Can I just share? I saw the best tweet about the Seth Roberts signing, and I normally don't give shout outs to random tweets, but Bobby Koch at Recked Fantasy on Twitter from DLF, he tweeted out the Seth Roberts news, and he said, "What is dead may never die," and that was just the most timely comparison for the Ravens signing Seth Roberts, because I don't know if he was talking about the wide receiver core or Seth Roberts himself.
Both probably.
See, Dan loves that because he gets a "What is dead may never die" in about every 3 episodes.
Yeah,
give or take.
Oh, really? That's fantastic.
Oh, I say it a lot.
He uses it a lot.
That could be its own podcast. Just Dan sitting there and just
it's a
just yelling at people.
Who wants to listen to that?
That's pretty much
this is who said to me this week.
That's what this podcast is.
Dan says random shit and then be quiet.
The Giants waived wide receiver Quadri Henderson, who was somehow on an NFL roster, and he was later claimed by the Jets for whatever reason. That's the reaction we should get. Moving on.
I think maybe he just didn't want to move. Maybe he liked his apartment and he was like, "Pay me whatever."
Pretty much.
Problem with Quadri Henderson is that he's in the league. The Packers re-signed wide receiver Jake Kumaro, who they had tendered, so just another talented guy to add to that mix.
Biggest news of this segment.
I love Jake Kumaro.
Hell yeah.
He's worth a dynasty stash if you're paying attention.
And kind of related to what we were talking about before, Aaron Rodgers does like Jake Kumaro.
He does. Unlike Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Equanimous St. Brown and Jamon Moore, apparently.
Jeez.
In injury news, Philip Lindsay has not put a timetable on his return from a wrist injury, and the Denver Post reports it would be a surprise if he's ready for training camp. Any concern with that trickling into the start of the season? And do you go by
Royce Freeman?
Yes.
Royce Freeman.
I don't know why that name eluded me because I love Royce Freeman.
I mean, I do. Because I liked Royce Freeman a lot coming out of last year's draft class. I already have him in most places. I did not sell him in most places, but I mean, I'm doing multiple dynasty startup drafts right now where, Freeman's around in the 8th and 9th round. And listen, let's call Philip Lindsay for what he is. He had a fantastic season. I'm happy. I'd love to see the guy keep doing well, but he's an undrafted free agent who now is struggling through an injury problem with a new coaching staff. Royce Freeman's going to have every opportunity to win this job.
And that's the most under the radar thing is that this is a completely new offense that he's coming into. And if he's not ready by training camp time and he falls behind, if Royce can get his shit together, that may be his job and more. And we may be seeing the buy or the sell window for Philip Lindsay closing even quicker.
That's exactly where I'm at with it, too. I liked Royce Freeman a lot coming out. He's more built to be an every down back. I think that as long as Philip Lindsay is chunking off plays, that you're going to have at least a mixed bag. But this could be the opportunity he needs, even if Philip Lindsay misses part of training camp and Royce Freeman has a good training camp and earns himself a role to where, he cuts into his carries. So I'm big on Royce Freeman, and I think that now is the opportunity to buy him because I think he ultimately is what emerges as a long-term solution there, not Philip Lindsay.
Go buy Royce Freeman.
And other sleeper news or guys that we like this season, Anthony Miller, who had shoulder surgery after dislocating it twice last season, expects to be limited throughout the offseason program. I believe he is still expected to be ready to go by training camp, though. So, I mean, he just had shoulder surgery not that long ago, so this isn't too surprising.
Good, because I love Anthony Miller.
I do, too. In retirement news, Josh Sitton, former Packers, Bears, and one-game Dolphins guard, has retired. So,
was it the one game with the Dolphins that really made him reconsider?
They're the new Bills.
They are the new Bills.
That's a lot warmer.
Yeah. Just ask Francor.
Yep. All right. Without further ado, let's get to the rookies.
Draft preview.
All right, this is a two-parter. We're going to be breaking down mostly our top 12 wide receivers in this one. Matt, we're going to let you talk about whatever. But for Dan and I, we're mostly going to keep this to our top 12, and we'll cover the rest of the guys next week. It is a deep wide receiver class, so this is the only position group we're giving 2 episodes to. But let's go ahead and start with the cream of the crop. There's been 4 guys that have been talked about that have been debated as top options. It's really kind of turned into a 2 to 3 horse race with one of these guys falling off, but arguably, I think this is most people's consensus top 4 in some order. N'Keal Harry, A.J. Brown, Hakeem Butler, DK Metcalf. We're going to go ahead and start with Matt. Who do you like most out of this group?
This has changed over the course of watching tape and particularly the combine, but currently N'Keal Harry is my wide receiver 1 and 101 overall.
Yep.
That is
agree.
All of us then. We're completely in agreement there. Dan, why don't you go ahead and kick us into what we like about N'Keal Harry?
Well, the fact is that he's got similar size and length to what DK Metcalf presents. Same bench. Obviously didn't blow away with the massive 40 time, but the production's there. The production's been there. Fantastic breakout age, 18.7, 95th percentile. He dominated in a run-first offense at given a 43.9% college dominator rating. He might be the safest pick in terms of the top guys, and he's got arguably the highest upside Even compared to a guy like DK Metcalf, he's worthy of the 101 with no real true RB1 in this class, and a guy that I'm targeting if I have a top 2 or 3 pick.
You heard it here first, guys. No true RB1 in this class impacts N'Keal Harry as a wide receiver pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wait. I'm the idiot here. Yep, that one's on me. Gonna move on. This was an awkward moment where Dan has a valid point, and I misinterpreted.
Dan, the BFF 101.
No.
Whoops.
You heard it here first, folks.
That one is on me.
Anyways,
other things to like about N'Keal Harry. 2 seasons over 70 receptions and 1,000 yards. So the college production was definitely there. 5 or more touchdowns all 3 years. 9 games over 80 yards last season. He finds another gear once he has the ball in his hands, and that's very, very evident on his tape. He's very strong after the catch. Great at positioning his body against defensive backs. He can go up and get the ball. A lot of Alshon Jeffrey, I think, in his ability to kind of win those contested catches. He also has that same spectacular catch ability we saw with Alshon Jeffrey, especially when he was with the Bears. He's got a few levels that can be unlocked at the next level. He needs a coach to translate his after-the-catch speed, footwork, and physicality, I think, into his route running, because I think when N'Keal Harry really shines is after he gets the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he's basically Courtland Sutton, but bigger, and was actually able to do it over the course of a couple years.
I think he's a little more refined than Sutton.
Yeah,
I think he's a lot more athletic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and just the fact that he can do so much after the catch for a guy his size. I believe he also returned punts, so he just adds another level of versatility to his skill set.
Yeah. I love how athletic this guy is. I think he's got really good hands. I mean, to call the quarterback play questionable in Arizona State would probably be nice.
Yes.
But he oftentimes made off-target passes on target by bringing them in. Seriously good vision and footwork. I mean, he reminds me of a running back when he has the ball in his hands after the pass, but he has all of the skills to get the ball downfield. So, maybe N'Keal Harry is the running back one in this draft class in terms of his ability to move with the ball in his hands.
I was right.
He could be. My only concern with him is the before catch stuff. I thought his route tree was a bit limited with a little bit of a lazy technique because, as we just mentioned, N'Keal Harry really excels after the ball's in his hands, but it's before the ball gets there that I think you're going to have to polish him up a bit. He doesn't gain a ton of separation. A little bit of chest catching, even though the hands are good, but I think really my only concerns with him are what he does before the ball's there. Now, he can beat defensive backs, but I'd like to see him athletically in contested mode, but I'd like to see him kind of translate some of what he does after the catch into his route running, into the pre-catch stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, separation and route running are definitely the 2 things that I would knock him on, but those are much more teachable things. That level of athleticism is not teachable, right? And so if he finds himself in a situation where he's getting good coaching, which I would imagine would have to be an improvement from Arizona State, he's gonna really develop still, which is what I like about him. I don't think.
Hold on, isn't Herm Edwards the head coach at Arizona State?
He is.
Yes.
All right.
But they don't care about passing in that offense. I mean, Dan was right. Harry's ability to perform in that offense, like I feel like N'Keal Harry should be a guy that we're talking about, like, oh man, if he was just in the right system in college, he would have been so fantastic. But yet he was still fantastic, even though he's in a system that just was not made for him.
It's like he's the guy you bring out when people were like, well, DK Metcalf, all this, had all this competition around, or like Riley really was in a run first offense. So who the fuck was N'Keal Harry was too? I mean, they ran a shit ton 2 years ago with Kalen Ballage and whatever the fuck his name was.
The other guy who
and he still
doesn't
produced.
matter. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. All right. So N'Keal Harry, consensus across the board, wide receiver 1. Moving on to the wide receiver 2. I know Dan and I are in agreement with this. It's the best Ole Miss wide receiver in this draft. AJ Brown.
Matt, where do you have AJ Brown?
A reaction out of me? Here's the thing. I'm okay with this. Okay. I am very okay with this because I love AJ Brown. But my thing with AJ Brown, if we're thinking about him specifically in terms of fantasy football, I think he has a high floor. I think he has a low ceiling. And I think he is a guy who could jump very high in my rankings with a good landing spot that's really going to be able to manufacture through him. And I love his tape, but he's my wide receiver 5 because when I take into account fantasy, I like having ceiling. And I just don't know if that is there with AJ Brown, but I love his tape, and there's a lot to love about him.
So I want the Giants to end up with AJ Brown.
I want him to go to Pittsburgh. Actually, I would love to see him in an offense that's going to still throw a shit ton.
Both good.
I think be the number one guy.
Both good landing spots.
Yeah.
Brown.
Avoid Baltimore. We don't want him in Baltimore.
No Baltimore. Yeah.
No Seattle.
He might be the only guy that could help. Nope, you're wrong. Nope, never mind. Nope, you're good.
I mean, as a quasi Ravens fan here, I would love it. But I would like it as a Ravens fan, but as not for my fantasy football roster.
Yeah, no. So AJ Brown, he's the only SEC player in the College Football Reference database with multiple 1,000-yard, 75 reception seasons with more than 5 touchdowns in each of them. Very, very good after the catch. Strong on his feet, deceptively elusive. He's a physical route runner and uses his frame to separate at the top of his routes, which is, that's a great way to create separation, especially in press coverage. He tracks the ball in the air incredibly well. He can play both slot and outside. He actually played slot in 2017 before he moved outside in 2018 with a DK Metcalf injury. Engages as a run blocker and occasionally looks good at it. But he knows where soft spots are, and there's just a lot that he does well to where I agree. His floor is higher than anybody else in this top tier. The upside,
I agree with that. Yeah,
not quite as high as an AJ Brown or a DK Metcalf or even a Hakeem Butler, but the floor is there. So if you're a safer type of player, what's the guy you want to go with? There wasn't a whole lot for me to knock on him either.
He's just a well-rounded receiver. I think he's going to produce with whatever team he says, which is why he has the highest floor in this class. And I think if you can land on an offense that can produce at least more than one fantasy-relevant receiver, or at least as a pass-happy team, he could be massively productive early on.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's all good. I mean, I want to point out that his ability to create separation with his hands is some of the best in this class.
Oh, definitely.
Yes, yeah, I agree completely.
I'm not sure that I love his full route tree. Like, I don't think he has the most developed route tree, but his slant is filthy. I call it OBJ light. Like, it is that level of slant. Like, he is very, very effective working the middle of the field with that. And so, even though he's my wide receiver 5, like, if you get him at 105, you should be pretty happy with that.
I agree.
I agree with that completely. You said he's your 5, so who is your 2?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this. It's moved a lot, but I could not deny the combine performance and the ceiling that comes with DK Metcalf. So he's currently my 2.
That's fair, because he could be Andre Johnson or he could be Chris Cooley. Not Cooley, Chris Conley, excuse me.
Yep. Let's move on to DK Metcalf then, since that's where Matt has taken us. Look, if you've been listening to the show the last few weeks, you've heard me make a lot of shots at DK Metcalf's tape, and there's a reason for it. Never mind the oft-injured thing. He's played 12 games only once at Ole Miss. He's never had over 50 receptions, just 2 seasons over 500 yards. Of the 97 wide receivers to have the college production over the last 10 years, just Brandon LaFell and Martavis Bryant have turned into a long-term NFL career. Now, granted, Metcalf's injuries are not necessarily soft tissue related, so that doesn't mean that they're likely to repeat. But ton of concerns that I have with him, and mostly it's his agility. Look, when I look for wide receivers, I look for people that show a way to separate, that show me more than just straight line speed. His 3-cone was a 7.38. That is not fantastic. Yes, he had the explosion to go downfield, but it shows in his route running also. His cuts are very, very long. There's nothing really in his route running that stands out. He doesn't do a ton after the catch. Yeah, I actually thought he went down pretty easy after he got the ball. Doesn't generally separate unless he just beats somebody on a 9 route. There's at least 3 times I saw in the 4 games I watched that he didn't break off into zone coverage, which shows a lack of football IQ to me. And he didn't really box out either, which is kind of upsetting because of his size. He's 6'3", 228, sorry.
Yeah, I think for me, all of those valid points, his agility, his lack of experience on the field are all legitimate points. What I will say to that is 2 things. One, there are things to like on his tape. I think he burns defenders consistently. He's got a huge high point. He has great handwork, both at the line of scrimmage and in contested pass situations. It helps that he's literally a monster. And so all of those things jump out as good. although his production profile is limited, in 2017, that was his redshirt freshman year, he caught 39 balls for 646 yards. That's 16.6 yards per catch, and he had 7 touchdowns. If you do that math, he caught a touchdown on 18% of his receptions. So when he got the ball, the dude was a huge touchdown threat. And then before suffering the neck injury in 2018, he had 7 games, 26 receptions, 569 yards, 21.9 yards per catch. You know, his combine performance, I know the agility scores were not fantastic, but 95th percentile in the 40, 93rd percentile in the vert, 97th in the broad. 99th in the bench. In, you know, I won't even list out the size ones because he's just 87th or above in every height or weight category you can think of. So I get it. And I'm cool. If you don't want to go for DK Metcalf, I'm cool with that. But if you need the upside, especially if you have like the 102, right, or the 101, for some reason you got that and you have a solid roster already, like you're not in a full rebuild, I think you got to go DK Metcalf. But I think if you are in a rebuild, he's definitely not the safest player to go for.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, is like if you're in a rebuild, you want to get a guy who may not produce as much year one. He's still a raw prospect, missed a lot of time, and when you put all that into his production profile, into his advanced metrics, there's a reason why there's a bunch of mixed bags with what he could become in the NFL. And I think if you are a team that's in a rebuild, why not take a chance on Metcalf, who, for the most part has the highest ceiling in this class if he lands on the right team. But even then, if he doesn't, like the guy's a freak specimen that could change a roster, both in NFL and in a fantasy sense within a couple years.
He definitely
football question though, Dan. Like philosophically, would you rather, if you have to rebuild your roster, would you rather have a guy like AJ Brown who you think could produce consistently, or would you rather take the risk on DK Metcalf?
I think if you're a team who has a high draft pick with a good roster around him, I think AJ Brown's probably the right pick because you're likely to get more fantasy production from him early on, which is what you want from your team. If you're a team that's in a rebuild, you want to go for the highest upside that you can possibly get. And while we just mentioned before, Brown may not have that, that's all DK has at this point.
So I'm going to go the opposite route. If I'm a rebuilding team, I'm trying to get somebody to build around with a high draft pick, and I'm going to go AJ Brown because I want consistency year in and year out. I want a guy that's going to be reliable, that I feel like I can make a cornerstone, and I don't want a high upside dart throw that might prolong my rebuild in DK Metcalf. I will say this: DK Metcalf is a better prospect than either Cortland Sutton or Corey Davis were the last 2 seasons. With the upside, they were all raw athletic talents. I do think he's a better prospect than either of those two. However, he's still 4th to me in this draft class because I see a high bust potential.
Yep.
Yeah, I like both of those.
I agree with all those points. So
yeah, I think it really depends on the player which way you go with that. I'll suggest the third alternative, which is if you have the 102, try to trade back to the 105 and get an extra pick right in the back end of the first or the early second or something like that, right? Because
take whoever's left
pretty well.
You just keep trading down because this is the lowest the 101's been worth, I think, for as long as I can remember.
And that's because nobody's sure who it should be, and even then,
exactly.
I think the general dynasty consensus is settled on N'Keal Harry, but nobody feels great about that. So. We did have a question before we move on from Bob Money. He wants to know who we think the 49ers are going to draft at number 2. And my personal thought on this is I think that the 49ers go defense. I think that they go with Nick Bosa.
Yeah. If they don't trade out, with a team that wants to draft a quarterback that high, if a team wants to try to trade up to take a Haskins, or if for some reason Murray doesn't make it at the 101, that's a great landing spot for a team that's got great pieces around them already that just needs to start building depth.
And that's what I really think they do. I think if they make the pick, it's Nick Bosa, but I think the 49ers are better served getting more draft capital and trading back out of that pick when I look at their roster. They need some defensive pieces. Sure, they could use a wide receiver 1, but their wide receiver core is not necessarily terrible, and they have a premium tier tight end. I think they could trade back in the first round, still get that wide receiver 1, and earn some draft capital as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I hate that we're at the point where I think we accept that Arizona's going to draft Kyler Murray, but I think
don't.
no matter what, they go defensive line. So if the Cardinals do select Bosa, then I think that the 49ers could go either Quinnen Williams or Josh Allen, maybe Brian Burns if they're feeling real bullish. If not, then I think they do go Bosa. So there's just too much talent at the top. You know what I mean? In terms of defensive and edge rusher, it's such an important position in the NFL.
I agree completely. All right, moving on to the fourth guy that we haven't talked about yet, Hakeem Butler, big receiver, 6'5", 227, was not the top option in his offense though until last season after Allen Lazard left. He did put up a good season though, 60 receptions, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. What do we see in Hakeem Butler? All right, so I'll go ahead and say what I see in Hakeem Butler.
Sorry.
Hey, Dan, I thought
It's good. I'll just go ahead. He's a two-season starter, 22 yards per reception. He's a big body. I thought he showed very, very good speed for his size with above-average acceleration. His combine kind of backs that up. He was sub 4.5 for a very, very big wide receiver in the 40. Thought he had good sideline footwork, pointed the ball really well. He's incredible after the catch. Created separation well with his hands and his speed, and plays both sides of the field, even sliding into the slot as a 6'5" guy. He kind of reminded me of a slightly more versatile Mike Evans with better hands.
Ooh. That's high praise.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. I'm cool with the high praise. I love Hakeem Butler. Actually, my pinned tweet on Twitter right now is my Hakeem Butler article for the Gridiron Experts, where I also write Dynasty and NFL draft content. And it kind of blew up, and I think it blew up because of the way I phrased it. My tweet was like, Hakeem Butler is my wide receiver 4, but he could be the wide receiver 1. Like, he has all of the upside and potential. I love his story. You know, this is a guy, he was ranked 271st. The 271st ranked wide receiver in the 2015 high school draft class. His only major offers were Houston, which was his local institution at the time, and Iowa State. And he had to really earn his time at Iowa State. Like, he didn't really play for his first 2 seasons there. And then even in his last season, you know, people talk about breakout age, but he really had to grind to get on the field. And even when he got on the field, he had to keep working to be more than a blocker because he's a huge blocker.
Mm-hmm.
But when this guy plays over the middle of the field, he's so freaking athletic. He's so freaking big. And he just makes plays that he has no business making. And for a guy his size to be able to move down the field that quickly and move so well with the ball in his hands, I mean, it's so impressive, and it's hard to not just have your jaw drop when you're watching him. So I know there's the hand issues that people bring up. And I know that his route tree may not be the most developed one, but I think all in all, this guy is a perfect combination of athletic, freak level talent, and he's still raw. Like, this guy for real has only played one full workload season, and he balled out in it. I mean, this guy had David Montgomery on his team, but I believe the offense ran through him.
It did run through him. They didn't have an offensive line that could block, and as you mentioned, the hands, he did have drops that were noticeable. They weren't necessarily what I would consider chronic, but they were absolutely noticeable. He also, for a bigger guy, did not necessarily adjust to the ball well in the air, and I would like to see more of a my ball mentality in him fight through corners, so there is some room for improvement. Dan, what did you see out of Hakeem Butler?
He's my favorite highlight reel guy to watch, because he makes just the most incredible plays, as Matt mentioned earlier. Like, he makes catches that he has no business making. And I think he proved that even with a low BOA and the fact that he couldn't beat out Allen Lazard, maybe that wasn't him. Maybe that's more on the coaching staff and the offense wanting to give Lazard, the senior, more work, that he could be something more. Now, to that point, if he's still a raw prospect at 23 years old, that's a bit of a tough pill to swallow, because by the time his breakout could come, he could be getting close to that 30, that 30-year-old mark. To the mention of his hands, he has 12 drops. This is per PFF in 2018, 16.7% drop rate. But it's not like he's body catching these things. It's not because of just bad technique. It's just because he's still a raw prospect. The fact that he still needs to redefine how he attacks the football in the air and with his positioning, and he needs to redefine his route tree more, which I don't know if he can get much better in terms of, with his agility and being much more than just a vertical outside threat. He doesn't show quite the yak ability of a guy like N'Keal Harry, but he's got the speed to do it, and he showed it at least a little bit on film that he could be that guy. There is some bust potential to him, just given why he took this line to break out. But as Matt said, I love his story. I love what he was able to overcome. And I think he could be someone that could really benefit, from not being the number one right away, in an offense, and then allowing him to go one-on-one either against a corner or against a safety playing ball hawk.
All right. I agree with that completely.
Yeah. Just two other quick notes on Hakeem Butler before we move on. To what Dan said, this dude was like constantly, whether it was called or not, so much defensive pass interference when you look at his tape. I think that contributes to his drops. It doesn't explain all of it, but I think it contributes to it. And Hakeem Butler is a monster blocker. I think it's going to get NFL teams to really like him. I think he's going to see the field early, but that could end up screwing him in terms of fantasy football because he could end up on the Seahawks or the Ravens, which would they would want to use him as a blocker more than for his catching ability.
I believe he's from Baltimore, and there's been rumors of links of him.
Yep.
The Ravens being really big fans of what he brings to the table. I don't think it'll quite kill him because at least it gives Lamar Jackson a reason to try to, test the ball deep, and the fact that he can do stuff after the catch. But it's still not an offense that I want to own receivers with.
Yeah, he's from Baltimore and lived here until age 9, I believe. And then a family circumstance forced him to move to Houston, where, fun fact, he lived with Andrew and whatever the other Harrison brother is, the basketball NBA players. I don't really follow the NBA, but he lived with Andrew and the other NBA player, like his brother, somebody Wiggins. That's gonna just drive me crazy.
Well, if you figure it out, you can just shut it out.
Yep.
That's pretty much what we do here. Like I'll shut out something randomly. I'm like, oh yeah, I got it now. We're good.
All right. That pretty much covers the top 4 of most people's consensus: N'Keal Harry, AJ Brown, Hakeem Butler, DK Metcalf. Let's move on to some other guys that are making some noise but are not necessarily considered top tier. These are guys that either were hyped or are hyped or showed out at the combine that are a little bit more polarizing. Let's start with Kelvin Harmon, and we're going to try to go a little bit faster through these. Dan, I know you were high on Kelvin Harmon, then you kind of faded him as I did as well. So break him down for me.
I think for me is when you watch this film, and then, man, I'm going to give you a shout out to this because I somewhat agree with what your very early take on him was, and that he does play a lot like DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, where like even if he can't create a lot of separation, he just find ways to get the football in his hands and make plays. Shows very strong hands. He has a decently high BOA and dominator rating, which helped in an offense that sucked because I'm not a fan of their quarterback.
The quarterback is terrible.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. I think if it wasn't for a poor combine, we'd be talking about him again in the top 3 to 5 situation. But I think just given what we see from him in terms of after that post combine, it's hard to find his role because he might not be quick enough to play outside. He might not be athletic enough because he didn't post a very high SPARQ score. Shout out to Nick Sparks and his level of SPARQ scores. But he shows a lot of promise as a blocker. He should get on the field, and I think he's going to work well as a good number 2. That if he lands in a high-powered offense, could yield fantasy value early on.
Yep, and just to throw that out there, as a 4.60 40, 7.153 cone, 4.32 20-yard shuttle, average but not great. Matt, your thoughts on Kelvin Harmon?
Yeah, this was tough for me. I love Kelvin Harmon. I love his tape. He far and away has the best tape score to me. I think he's the most pro-ready wide receiver. I think he's very well-rounded. I think he has a really high ceiling. I knocked him down to wide receiver 3 for me post-combine because I can't ignore that. But I want to point out that the combine doesn't always measure, it's not a perfect correlation, and some people don't care about the combine. I do care about the combine. I think it's legitimate, and it points out some flaws in people's games. But what Harmon does well doesn't show up necessarily at the combine. I think he's the best route runner in his class. His footwork is seriously dangerous, consistently creates separation at the line of scrimmage with some really violent and aggressive handwork. always wins contested passes situations. Like, it's almost hard to quantify or qualify, I should say, what he does to win contested passing situations, but he always wins. He always outbodies defensive backs, and playing in the ACC, that's a fairly decent level of defensive competition. I think he's got the best high point in the class, even though he's not necessarily the tallest dude. Like, he goes up and gets balls, and his reaction skills cannot be undersold. Like, his ability to react to terrible passes from Ryan Finley is just freaking fantastic.
Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that's his name.
Fuck that guy.
one of the things I want to point out too, it's similar to the N'Keal Harry thing we were talking about. He had no business having a high level of production in his offense. North Carolina State doesn't care about the passing game. Remember, this is the offense that produced Jalen Samuels and Nyheim Hines in 2017. Like, all they ever want to do is run the ball down the throat. And, I kind of get it because Ryan Finley. But that speaks to Kelvin Harmon's production. And also, he is far and away the best blocking wide receiver in his class. He's going to be on the field week 1 in the NFL. I'm super confident with that.
All right. Moving on, another guy that took out a lot of waves because of an incredible combine performance is Paris Campbell. And I'm going to take the lead on this because I originally thought Paris Campbell was going to be a Curtis Samuel comparison, and I could not have been more wrong. He put up a 4.31 on the 40, 4.03 20-yard short shuttle. So very, very good numbers there. But Paris Campbell, unlike Curtis Samuel coming out, he's a plus route runner with excellent speed that allows him to run away from guys. He's a hands catcher. He plucks the ball like you'd like to see. Quick breaks, solid footwork. He is more of a refined wide receiver with a ton of athleticism. He doesn't really make guys miss or change direction well, so he's going to be more of a straight line guy. Occasionally struggles to separate on intermediate routes, and he's not a guy who's going to win contested catches, but he is a guy that I think could win on kind of a Martavis Bryant type of level. When Martavis Bryant was good with the Steelers, that is. But Paris Campbell, unlike Curtis Samuel, I think Paris Campbell is kind of worth the hype that he's getting. Maybe not quite that level, but he is a top 10 guy for me.
Yeah, I think, like, when I watch his game, I think he's a bigger John Brown, where he's slightly undersized in terms of his frame, and he's a massive vertical threat, but he's extremely athletic. He has better hands for a guy around that size. Only had a 5.2% drop rate, but he posted an incredible spark score, as Hopper mentioned, great speed and bird score. He did a lot of his work out of the slot, which I think is where he's going to be. If he's not trying to operate on the outside a little bit more, just given that somewhat slimmer frame of his, but he could be a yak guy. He goes on a little bit quickly. He's not going to break off tackles. He'll make guys miss, but that's more with speed, not just with short yard agility. So right offense as usual, right team, right fit. He could be, a very productive fantasy receiver. I think he's going to be a very good and valuable NFL receiver because he also returned kicks in his sophomore and junior season.
Yeah, this is a guy, man, he's really hard for me to figure out because evaluating tape on the Ohio State offense is so difficult because what they're asked to do isn't necessarily the most complicated stuff. And it took me a while to come around to Paris Campbell because for a while I thought, this guy's always open. It's just because of the system. And, there are certain things that open up with the offensive line that Ohio State has and in the way that they work their system. But the more and more I watch Paris Campbell, I see his ability to create separation. I see his quickness. I recognize his draft hype, and I do think draft capital is a legitimate thing. And so let's see where he goes on draft night. He's just outside of my top 5 for now. I don't think he'll break the top 5, but I definitely think he could slide a little bit. I think he'll end up in the top 10 for sure, but honestly, it kind of depends on the day for me. The more I watch Paris Campbell, I go back and forth on him.
Yeah.
I came around on him a lot because I generally don't want to like anybody from Ohio State, honestly. And it's not because I'm a college football fan or I have anything against Ohio State. There's just been so many overhyped prospects that have come out of there that I don't necessarily love. But I think Paris Campbell might be the one that kind of breaks that trend.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for somebody who is consistently solid in a very good system. Is it the system or is it him? And I'm not saying it's not Paris Campbell, but I
Mhm.
am saying that's something we should keep in the back of our head.
Well,
No,
I mean, like
I
you just
agree
said,
with
one
that.
productive season, so that's very much true. Was it him or was it the fact that he finally got a chance to show out?
And it's the big difference in the tape for me. I don't like Mike Weber. Terry McLaurin, I'm not as high on as some other people. Curtis Samuel, last year, 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago.
I was not high on in the least bit, even though a lot of other people were. But Paris Campbell is really probably the first Ohio State player that I've watched and thought, okay, yeah, I see it. So just to wrap that up with him, moving on, Miles Boykin of Notre Dame, he went out and just destroyed the combine. He beat DK Metcalf in every measurable combine drill except the 40. It's a 6.773 cone, 4.42 on the 40, so still very, very good for a guy that comes in at 6'4", 220. Dan, you're exceptionally high on him. Well, I go pee because I can't hold it anymore. Take the lead on what you think about Miles Boykin.
We're speaking of guys who have massive ceiling, who could have massive ceiling. As Hopper mentioned, he completely destroyed the combine from the wide receiver spot. He posted nearly 90 percentile or higher in speed, burst, and agility. He's got the rare combination of size, speed, and length. 125.6 bar score, 94th percentile. So you know that he's going to be able to work on the inside and the outside from the wide receiver position. Massive catch radius. He's got great arm length. For some reason, I'm obsessed with these bigger receivers and their long ass arms. 33.5-inch arm length. Fantastic. Raw prospect though. I think he only had one productive season. And I think at times he just kind of doesn't want to live up to his athletic potential. Again, though, he was one of the highest graded run blockers in this class. Again, just like with Calvin Harmon and Akeem Butler, he should be able to find the field early on if he's not a starting receiver for a guy who can at least block. I see a lot of upside with him. That's why I'm so high on him. Matt, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Dan, I think that Miles Boykin is the perfect example of why the combine is important.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go back and forth, views on the combine. It's important. It's not. It's this. It's that. It plugs into a formula. It doesn't. For me, what I love about the combine is it gives me the opportunity to find players that I wouldn't have paid attention to before. Because, pulling out players and finding players as you're watching tape and building your database and your rankings, guys really start to blend together, and you have to really start trusting, who other people are talking up. And nobody was talking up Miles Boykin because he was playing in this trash Notre Dame offense. I mean, truly, the quarterback play was very poor.
You mean to tell me that Wimbush isn't a good quarterback?
God, he's bad. He can't throw a deep ball to save his life.
He's god-awful.
Oh,
right.
God.
But then I flip on the tape, and if you look past quarterback play and past production, right, because it doesn't necessarily show up, you see a guy who's quick, who's athletic, who gets off the line of scrimmage pretty quickly, who accelerates really well downfield. And then you start to see some more nuanced stuff. The way that he moves his shoulders and hips while running routes, it really sells defenders. He does a really good job of that. And I think he's one of the few wide receivers in this draft class that play best on the third level of the field. And so there's a lot of guys, right, like Paris Campbell, like A.J. Brown, who are 8 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. You want to give him the ball, like N'Keal Harry. But
Yep.
Miles Boykin's a guy who you could throw the ball 30 yards down the field on. Now, that might mean he ends up in an NFL offense where he only gets 4 or 5 targets a game. But if he brings in 3 of those and they're all worth 25 to 30 yards, then you got a decent guy to play in your flex spot. So I definitely think Miles Boykin is a guy who's worth paying attention to. Will I jump at him early? No. But if for some reason he's still hanging around in the 3rd round of my rookie drafts, I'm jumping on it.
I can't wait, or I guess I can't wait. I hope he lands in an offense that wants to push the football vertically, because we didn't get to see that a lot, just given how bad Notre Dame is. And I don't even know what the fuck his quarterback's name was, because I don't really give a shit. Because he can't throw a deep ball to save his life. But I think that's where Boykin's upside really shines, is that ability to create separation even downfield and use his wins and use his long wingspan and frame to create wins in 50-50 situations.
Dan, what if I think Boykin's what a late day 2, early day 3 pick probably. Still,
I think his combine made him a late day 2. He could be the next Kenny Galladay, where he just comes out of nowhere, crushes the combine, and a team takes the chance on him and could become something even bigger.
So what if like the Chargers take him to replace Tyrell Williams, right? Like that's the kind of offense where he would get a chance to shine.
He'd be a great number 2 to Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
Wait, what about Mike Williams?
Yeah, exactly.
But there's plenty there. There's plenty to go around.
There's a lot of offense.
There's
and
a
that's
lot.
what I mean. He might only get 4 or 5, targets a game, but if Phillip Rivers is throwing him that ball and he has the potential to find the end zone, you're looking at a solid guy.
It'd be a good NFL move, I think, for fantasy, because they just pigeonholed Williams, both Williams in their own role and didn't let them be more than what they could have been. With Boykin, they could at least try, just given what we see, from his athletic metrics. But I'd be afraid to get pigeonholed and just, the new Travis Benjamin or the new Tyrell Williams.
Fine, send him to Washington. Case Keenum can throw him the ball.
He doesn't play in the slot. He's gonna fall in love with Trey Quinn. I'm calling it now.
Yeah. All right, moving along from Miles Boykin, a guy that was catching a lot of hype pre-draft, and then it kind of died down, or pre-combine, I guess, and then it kind of died down post-combine, and I'm not sure why, because I thought he helped himself with the combine. Andy Isabella. Isabella's a guy that's undersized at 5'9", 188. He did run a 4.31 40 though. 121 broad, 4.15 20 yards, 3 cone, I believe was good. I don't know why I don't have it written down. But he's a guy who backed this up with his tape. He had 2,000-yard, 10-plus touchdown seasons, so he dominated the lower-level competition at Massachusetts. He was used in motion a ton and as a runner. I thought he had a quick release at the line, quickness in and out of his breaks. I thought his route tree was better than any other straight speed guy in the draft. But he also accelerates very, very well, showed some elusiveness, and tracks the deep ball well. So, to me, Andy Isabella might be what we thought Tavon Austin was going to be all those years ago.
Yeah, and he completely dominated the competition, which is what you want to see from a guy who's not playing at a big school. 52.2%, dominator rating, 97th percentile. He destroyed what was a great Georgia offense. I think he had 15 receptions, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Granted, a lot of that came late, at least the touchdowns in the big play. But he's more than just an underneath slot receiver, as Hopper mentioned. He does do well tracking the football downfield, even though he's not a bigger guy. He should be something at least, serviceable at the next level. I think he helped himself get up there. He was a standout, at the Senior Bowl and during the practices. So I think he'll earn himself a potential late day 2 pick. It just depends how teams want to view a guy who's not a big outside threat.
One of the things I like to, and Andy Isabella is a guy who, for me, I don't dislike him. I just consistently find myself liking other players more than him. And so he keeps getting pushed down my rankings, not necessarily because of him, just because I find a guy who I like a little bit more. But I do want to point out, he gets the rep for not facing a high level of competition. And yeah, compared to a lot of guys in the Big Ten or the SEC, he didn't. But if you look at his 2018 game logs, he actually had some fairly good level of competition. Remember, UMass is independent, so they could kind of pick and choose who they play. He had Boston College, where he had 5 receptions for 96 yards. Boston College was a top 25 ranked team for a lot of this last season. He caught 9 receptions and 95 yards against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is continuously one of the best teams in the Sun Belt, or whatever that random one that they are, but they do play at a high level of competition for their conference. South Florida continuously dominates the American, for whatever that does for you. He had 13 receptions, 191 receiving yards, and a touchdown. And then, like Dan said, he went off against Georgia, 15 receptions, 218 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And let's not forget Brigham Young, BYU. They're really good at basketball. He caught for
and not having sex.
And never forget Jimmer Fredette.
And not having sex.
And not having sex.
Looking at you, Jamal Williams. Looking at you.
Yes, did you?
What's that?
Didn't think you were going to get a Jimmer Fredette reference today.
No.
I did not. I did not wake him like, hey, you know what I need in my life? A Jimmer Fredette
No,
reference.
but Jamal Williams, that's what he was suspended for at BYU, was sex and underage drinking. So being a college kid, just never forget.
Hey, that's what they sign up for, man.
It is. All right. Moving on to another guy that's catching a ton of hype, and I am straight going to let you guys fight about this one. JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
I don't want to fight about it.
I want to fight about it.
All right.
This was
You can
determined
say.
on the Fantasy FANalysts podcast. By the way, be sure to check that out when it drops because it's fucking great. That you two are going to fight about this, so you're going to fight about this.
Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Here's my JJ Arcega-Whiteside take. I just don't get it. He's a power forward playing wide receiver. That's how I see him, and I don't really mean it in the good way. Here's what he does well. He's got a big frame, and he's strong, but he doesn't ever really win positioning consistently. I don't feel like he does a good job with his size. He's very slow on tape. I don't care what he ran at his pro day. He comes off extremely slow on tape. Limited vert for somebody that big. I would like to see him play bigger, but he doesn't really. Limited route tree. I didn't see really anything nice other than his curl route and maybe some fades. I do like his footwork. I saw him, his comeback routes are dirty, right? So his footwork, he sells the comeback routes, which, to be fair, like, I get why a defensive back would bite on that. He's going to do one of two things. He's going to try to run in a straight line past me, or he's going to turn around. So I'll play the straight line and let him catch the comeback route. And he doesn't use his hands to create space at all. I will say he doesn't drop the ball a whole ton. And so I think he does have, right, if we're talking fantasy football, he has the potential to be this like red zone threat in the NFL. He has the ability to be that. He's so landing spot dependent. And for me, the notion that he's going in the second round of the NFL draft, I just don't get it. Maybe a team will do that. I'm not an NFL GM, but it would confuse me. So yeah, if he lands in the perfect spot, like if he goes to the Patriots, yeah, sure, I'll believe it. Or the Saints, fantastic. Sign me up. But otherwise, I don't see it.
I guess for me was because I have the same cons written down. I wasn't high on it. I wasn't extremely high on his tape. It was, decent pro day. I went back and I rewatched it. I think he is what he is. He's a great outside threat. I think he runs great vertical route. I think he positions himself well enough to win because he can use his long arms. He does a better job at winning at the high point than a lot of these bigger guys here. He's the second highest graded PFF grade, for whatever that's worth for all these receivers in this class. I guess for me is that I tend to be more attracted to these bigger outside guys for whatever that's worth. It's gotten me into some trouble. But I just love his upside with that. But I do agree with a lot of your points. I don't do well when I get put on the spot like this, by the way, but I do like, his body, or like he's well put together for that. And I think his role for that could be, just as you said, Matt, his upside, if he lands in the right system, is why I think he's higher than this. And if you're going to take a shot in your rookie drafts, you want a guy who can, at least possess that, that sort of upside. And again, a guy who also dominated in a run for its offense, playing with Stanford and Bryce Love with the bad offensive line, in 2018, he was at least able to produce and, to some effect.
Yeah, I think my thing with JJ is like, I don't dislike him. Like, I'm looking at my rankings and I put him 14, which obviously isn't fantastic, but I'm not like, there's only a point that I can drop him to. You know what I mean? Like, he's solid. I just don't think I like him as much as other people like him, which then turns it into like, I hate him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with the point that he does kind of move like a tight end as well. That was one thing I did have on him, is I did not like the way that I did not like his mobility. Let's put it that way. Moving on to a guy with a ton of mobility that is probably the most polarizing player, and this is Marquise Hollywood Brown. Guy that stands only 5'9", 166 pounds, which is massively undersized, but he produced 2 seasons over 1,000 yards and 50 receptions, 17-plus yards per carry, or catch, rather, both years. Thought he ran a decent route tree. He showed good quickness and footwork, worked back to the quarterback well, played outside and in the slot, which the speed allowed him to do because it definitely wasn't his size. He could run by defenders. Granted, it is a Big 12. And break away after the catch. Solid footwork. Biggest knock on him was that he was undersized, but he definitely had a knack for the big play and a knack for making things happen. So, opinions on Hollywood Brown, who I think might be the biggest upside, biggest downside player in this draft.
I just think it's just a small frame. Like, I'm afraid he can't play up to a full season, just given the amount of hits he could be taking. One hit over the middle, and he could be completely done, for that time being because of how tiny he is. He's coming off of a foot. I think he has a Liz Frank foot injury, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a Liz Frank,
which does take some time for him to actually recover from, see Julio Jones and see Sammy Watkins for that. But he does have massive big play potential, and I think that's what's going to get him drafted high, is that he played in an offense that was perfectly suited for him, which is what a lot of these offenses in the NFL wants to try to mimic now, these high scoring. That's why they're hiring these college coaches. I think he could fit well in what the NFL wants to be, just whether or not he can actually keep himself healthy on the field.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a Hollywood fan at all. Burning Big 12 defensive backs doesn't do anything for me.
True.
I legitimately, I have to fact check this, but I heard a fact that there's like less than 5 defensive backs in the NFL that have come from Big 12 schools. Like, it's just not good.
Can I stop you right there for a second, though? Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you right there. Because you can say burning Big 12 defensive backs doesn't do anything for you, but burning small school defensive backs shouldn't do much for anybody either. And that's where I get a little bit hung up, because everybody wants to go after the small school guy like Andy Isabella that has success against some of these defenses that are not necessarily from a big conference, but you get a guy who goes against a weak defensive conference, but a bigger conference, and their defensive backs, and can consistently burn them, and we want to hate on him for succeeding in the Big 12 against poor defenses, but we want to love the small school guy that succeeds against and dominates poor defenses, and I think that's a little bit of a double standard.
It's fair. Yeah, that's definitely a fair thing to point out, but there's plenty more that I dislike about him. So I will say, in addition to that, he's undersized would probably be an understatement. I'm pretty sure he weighs like $165 soaking wet.
Yeah. 166, and that was gaining weight for the combine. That is the biggest concern.
He doesn't come off all that athletic. I don't think he does well with the ball in his hands he's not a yak threat at all. And we know that really helps in fantasy football when you are. I think he's got rounded routes. He just does not have sharp cuts to me. And listen, this kind of hurts. And maybe this is part of the reason that I don't like Hollywood, because this person has burned me so much in the past. But he screams John Ross for me. I mean, he really does. And John Ross was faster. So I don't know. And now you take
John Ross was not faster on tape. John Ross did not show the ability to burn defenses like Hollywood Brown does.
That's true. And Hollywood did not run at the combine. So he very well could be faster than John Ross. That's a really good point. But I will say with missing the combine and with this injury, I'm less worried about he's going to recover from this injury. But, I think draft capital is a legitimate thing. And I think as he continues to miss this draft process and teams find other guys they like, I think the idea of Hollywood in the first is well gone. I think people have accepted a second round pick.
It should be.
Honestly, I think he goes in the third. I really think we see some of these other wide receivers go before him. And so, when it starts coming to that, then you got an undersized third round draft pick who's fast and might do well or might just be whatever.
It's like a Raiders thing. All right.
That's right.
All right. Let's go ahead and review our alcohol, and then we'll jump into some guys we personally want to talk about and close out the show.
Beer review.
As much as I love that drop, we may have to change
I think
it.
I'm going to have to change it from beer review.
I
think I'm gonna
for
have
the
to
first
remake
time
that.
ever.
It's not a beer review. We might have to do alcohol review instead. I will have to look into that. Dan, go ahead and drop us your first bourbon review on E.H. Taylor Small Batch.
This is my first time ever doing this, so I do apologize to the bourbon lovers who are going to get offended by how
I will try to help out where I can.
But on the nose, drinking this E.H. Taylor Small Batch, a lot of alcohol burn, at least for a little bit. When you let it sit and settle, it does bring out the dry fruit to it. I believe it brought up dry raisins. That's one of the main hitting points. You do get some of the pepper and some of the cinnamon and some of the caramel that are on there. On the mouth, though, the burn is exceptionally there, which I have to get past because there's a lot of good caramel and dry fruit type of flavor in there with some pepper sticking out. It's the aftertaste. I think it's what I love the most. It's just very subtle. The burn tends to go away, and you're just left feeling warm inside. That's how I put it.
Yeah, E.H. Taylor Small Batch is something that I've got a bottle of it sitting outside of here. I got to travel 2 hours, so I did not go bourbon. But E.H. Taylor, it's one of the smoother bourbons that are out there for the alcohol content that it has. It does lean a little bit towards the sweeter side than the burn or leathery tobacco side. But it's an easy sip, especially if you drop some ice in it to cool that burn a little bit.
Yeah.
All right.
Which I'm not doing.
Yeah. That's the way you should try them first all the time anyway, and then you decide if you need to add ice or not. All right. I had the Fudge Imperial Stout with Brownies from Prairie Artisan Ales. So a lot of fudge up front. It's essentially a fudge bomb. It's very, very sweet. You can tell it was aged on brownies. Very, very, very chocolatey drink. The Imperial Stout does come out. The alcohol content kind of lingers there on the end of it. It's also why I have the hiccups and I keep stuttering.
Sounds like me.
Overall, though, very, very solid Imperial Stout, especially if you're a fan of chocolate. Fudge is a very adequate name for this because it does pop that chocolatiness out of the front of it. Matt, do you want to talk about your Woodford Reserve and Coke?
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
That's a Dan review from early on.
We haven't had that review in a long time.
No, we
the
haven't.
Coke was maybe sitting in my fridge too long. It could have been more carbonated. I wouldn't call it flat, but
All right.
Coke a little sweeter, but I'll take this. Alcohol is good. Me likey. This is a random aside. I have been vibing and dancing to all of the drops, and I just realized that we're on YouTube, aren't we? Can people see me?
Yes. Oh, fuck yeah, I do it all the time.
People can see you.
Yes.
I was like, oh wait, hold on, I forgot this isn't just audio.
No,
I mean, we dance a lot. We also sing a lot.
You are split
It's a little bit harder because we're not in studio together anymore, but it does happen.
You are split screened on YouTube though, so everybody can see you. Although, here's the thing: if Dan was the last person to talk, it'll be his face and not you, so you might have a little bit of a reprieve.
It's probably better for them to see Dan's face, anyways.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, that's right.
All right,
matter of opinion, just like the wide receivers in this draft class.
That's right.
All right, we're gonna move on to some under the radar guys. We're gonna try to make this a little bit quick. These are guys that are in our top 12 that we've decided to kind of plant a flag on, and there's a guy that I know that at least two of us and probably three of us are more than happy to plant a flag on. He gets no love. It's the only guy Dan and I both had listed, and that is Stanley Morgan Jr. Dan, I'm going to let you kick this off, and I'll fill in whatever I need to.
I love Stanley Morgan. He's the best do-it-all receiver out of there. He's not just a slot receiver, but I think he's going to be pigeonholed in being that possession-style slot receiver because he had the third most receptions that went over 20 yards. This is per PFF. This is third in the class. And this is playing in an offense while it's not the most high-powered one out there. I love his route tree. I think he works well in both intermediate and short routes. I think he looked impressive given his deeper game. When I watched his tape, Michael Gallup comes to mind a little bit, and we all know how much I love Michael Gallup here. I think he has upside as a number 2 receiver in an NFL offense, and I think with that, and depending on that offense, you can see a lot of good fantasy upside that comes from it. He looks good in open field. He shows ability to make people miss in short area quickness, which comes to his, I believe, his agility score, which posted fairly well. And he can also muscle off weak tackle attempts.
Yep, 6'7", 8'3" cone. That backs up the agility. 4.53 40 backs up kind of a straight line speed, and Y was able to to break off some big runs. 6 foot, 202 pounds. You could play him slot or outside at that size. He'd be a slightly oversized slot receiver, slightly undersized outside receiver, so he could really go either way. He increased his receptions and yardage each year when he was in college. That includes a couple of years with Tanner Lee as quarterback, which, yikes.
Yeah.
He is a grinder, a very violent blocker. He has a my ball attitude. He's not afraid to take hits and go up and get it. Plays both outside and in the slot. That goes with what I just said with the size. He can do both. He's got a great feel on crossing routes. He's very, very much a Cooper Kupp type of receiver that I think is going to excel as long as he lands in the right place, which obviously landing spot matters with everybody. He's one of my favorite people going into draft season, though, and I hope he lands in a spot where he can excel. The biggest knock on him is his film doesn't show explosively fast or explosively agile. Again, that's very, very Cooper Kupp-like. He's just a hard hat lunch pail guy that's going to produce.
He's this year's Anthony Miller for me because I think he's one of the more aggressive players after the catch because of that type of attitude that he has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like both of those comps. Stanley Morgan, I only got to his tape last week when I was rounding out my wide receivers because I've now done 24 wide receivers. And he went from not having a tape review to my number 8 wide receiver. Like, I absolutely loved what I saw from him. Super athletic. I call him a gadget type player. I don't think he has the most built out route tree, but the things he does are very good. That's curls, posts, drags, flats are being targeted in the flat or off the line of scrimmage with a screen. All of those things he excels at. So everything that he does actually do becomes a really dynamic piece of a really good toolkit. He is a bit smaller, but I think he positions his body extremely well. Super aggressive hands. You're right. He's not quick off the line of scrimmage, but he does accelerate well downfield, and he creates space on almost every play. So although he's not quick, he uses his hands to create space, and so he is effective still in the short field. I think he's a big yard after catch threat. I think there's a lot to like with Stanley Morgan, and he's a guy, honestly, you could get mid to late third. Nobody's talking about this guy, but he is good.
We should probably stop talking about him.
Yeah, everyone be quiet.
Yeah, everybody be quiet because we don't want the hype to get too much. So there's a couple people that tried to start this hype train. Has not caught on. I would like to keep it that way.
Yeah.
All right. Moving along from that was Dan and I. Dan and I's both number 1 under the radar guy we wanted to talk about. Matt, you've got a guy by the name of Dylan Mitchell. I had not watched his tape just yet. He will probably be catching next episode for us. Go ahead and tell us what you like about him.
Yeah. I didn't realize we weren't going to talk about Jalen Hurd, or I would have put Jalen Hurd here.
He's on here.
Oh, he is on here. Okay.
He's on here.
He's another one whose tape I have not watched because I expect him to fall into the next episode. And because he's not technically in Dan's top 12, but he listed him as a guy who wanted to talk about under the radar.
Oh, yeah, my bad.
Okay, cool. Well, if after watching Jalen Hurd tape, you want to join the Jalen Hurd fan club, I am the conductor, and we meet every Saturday at 7 o'clock. So sounds great.
I will let you know by Thursday of next week.
Great, you'll be there at next week's meeting, I promise you. Here's the thing about Dylan Mitchell. He's seriously fast and quick. One of the few guys that does both. He's lethal on go routes. He absolutely dominated the Pac-12. And I know that's not the best defensive conference, but his stats are like super good. And I was like, why is nobody talking about Dylan Mitchell? He was another one of these like late film review guys for me because I've just picked up on them over time. Really quick feet. He uses them really well to create space. I mean, he dekes defenders like nobody else in this draft class. Consistently in the open field, can be effective at the second or third level. He has a deep post, long curl, short curl, 9-route fade. He primarily plays on the outside, but he also I think he is the ideal Y type receiver in this league. And I think if he fits in an offense where he can be the Y, like not the best guy on the offense, but like the Will Fuller to somebody's DeAndre Hopkins, and Dylan Mitchell can be an absolutely fantastic fantasy football player. Super landing spot dependent, but he's also super athletic. They use him on the jet sweep a lot at Oregon, and he always creates yards. So I think an NFL team that's more creative, like if he ends up with the 49ers, like that would be cool.
All right. I can't wait to watch this film.
No, I can't either.
Because I'm looking at what he's done for like Player Profiler. He put up a 35.6 college job rating, 69th percentile, 67th percentile speed score, 61st percentile burst score. Great to see. As Matt mentioned, dominated dominated in his junior year, 75 receptions, just shy of 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns. He did have a 9% drop rate, but with those drops, it can, it be forgiven, we'll say.
Yep, we will see what we have to like or not like about him. I'm sure he'll pop up next episode as hey, we might have missed that even. So, Dan, you've got Jalen Hurd down. I didn't mean for this to be our top 12, but go ahead and talk about real quick what you like about Jalen Hurd.
I think he's one of the more interesting prospects. So, a guy with a pretty interesting story coming into this. He's a 5-star recruit going to Tennessee, running back. He suffered a concussion, I believe, in his sophomore season. Wanted the offense to change. He wanted to move the receiver. He ended up transferring over to Baylor, where with one season of just wide receiver experience was able to put something pretty well together. 6'5", I believe 226 pounds, but he played both inside and outside, so he provides you that versatility that I like. I don't know if he'll be massively productive year one as he continues to learn how to play the position better, but what you see from him, he does run very clean routes, especially routes that would mimic what he ran probably as a running back, and that's the quick outs or the quick ins. And I'm not sure where he's going to be drafted, but he's one guy that I'm definitely watching to see where he lands.
All right, Matt, you had Emmanuel Hall down as a guy you wanted to talk about. Go ahead and sing his praises, and this is a guy I can't chip on.
Yeah, just real quick. I love Jalen Hurd. Dan gave him a lot of great justice there. I want to add in 2 things real quick. One, he still ran the ball 48 times at Baylor for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, so he could still be used as a running back in the NFL. 2, when he was at the University of Tennessee, he actually he was the reason that Alvin Kamara could not get on the field. Alvin Kamara was riding the bench behind Jalen Hurd. And that gave me enough time to pull up my notes on Emmanuel Hall.
That's how you did. Love it.
So kind of, honestly, a lot of the same things in the way that I like Dylan Mitchell. I think if Emmanuel Hall can be the number 2 guy on an offense, I think that would be really fantastic for him. A little bit of a straight line runner, but I think he accelerates extremely well. He can run it out really well, slants in that go route. The 9 is kind of his go-to. But I think he has really good footwork. I think he's got the ability to separate quickly and get downfield. So he's kind of a deep play guy, but somebody just to keep an eye on in terms of his landing spot. If he's with a quarterback who could really air it out, I think that there's a lot of upside there. And he's probably going to be like a round 3, maybe round 4 guy. So he could end up on, one of these better offenses. So kind of just a burner along the sideline, but his tape is really solid, and you might not have heard of him because he suffered a few injuries in college that, left his production lacking, but he was primarily the guy that Drew Lock threw the ball to at Mizzou.
Yeah, he did suffer some injuries in college. His career high in games played is only 10, which is not a full season. Career high in receptions is 37, which is also not great, but he did manage 800 yards each of the last 2 seasons, behind 22+ yards per reception. So 800 yards and 37 receptions, that's big playability.
Yep.
He has a good release at the line, which allows him to get inside corners and work. It's a long strider, which allows him to get a step, especially when running go routes. He did show some ability to work underneath, although it wasn't a prominent part of his game. Thought he tracked the ball well also, which is a deep threat. That's what you want to do. My issues with him, he played exclusively outside on the right side, which is an extreme lack of versatility. Worked mostly go routes, very, very incomplete route tree. His agility did not show up as a strong point for him. His hands were a little bit suspect. The other issue I have with him is the repeated soft tissue issues. Those are the one time I'll call a guy injury prone, is when you have repeated soft tissue issues. Strains repeat themselves. Tears, okay. Breaks, fine. Strains and sprains, that's when you got to be concerned about a guy's injury history.
Yeah, fair.
Dan, anything to add?
Nope, I haven't watched this tape yet, so.
All right. And then the last guy I wanted to talk about, and Dan, I know you are not in agreement with me on this, is DeMarcus Lodge. So DeMarcus Lodge, 6'2", 202 pounds, or as he's known pretty much in this, the other wide receiver from Ole Miss, outside of DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. 4.55 40, 706 3-cone, both pretty solid numbers, especially for a number 2 or a a slot guy. He'd be a big slot guy, but he's got 250 reception seasons. I thought he was strong after the catch. He carried guys along with him like a tight end. Picked up speed quick out of his breaks when he was route running especially. He had the ability to run away from defensive backs, works his way back to the ball well. Thought he had very, very good hands, great concentration when working through defenders to make contested grabs. He was a decent route runner as far as coming in and out of his breaks. And he was a hustle guy who really, I mean, you saw him sprint to plays to make blocks. My only issues with DeMarcus Lodge were his occasional drops. He did sometimes struggle to separate from man coverage, but again, he could go around defensive backs to make some plays, and that was playing outside. I think that if he were to get moved inside as a bigger slot guy or to not draw top coverage in the NFL, he could definitely find a way to make some hay. I think he's a guy that's relatively underrated.
I agree with a lot of the pros. He does high point the ball as well in 50-50. He does use his arm length most of the time. I think he's short arms, and I think he doesn't trust it enough. 33 and an eighth quarter inch arm length is just fantastic, 85th percentile. You mentioned the drop, 16 drops over his final 2 seasons, 8 in both of those seasons, which is 11% drop rate. And this year, that's a bad drop rate, which means that guy who on the outside who can create positionings, if you can't catch the football, it's tough to trust him as a fantasy option where he may only see 4 or 5 type of those targets a game. Speaking of guys who could be pigeonholed in that type of role, and then you look at his athletic profile, and it just gets a little bit worse for him. 95.6% or 95.6 speed score, 54th percentile for that is the only saving grace for him because his burst score and his agility score is lacking. He posted an 89.4 spark score at 9th percentile. So if he's not athletic enough to win on the outside and he's not quick enough to play in the slot, I don't know what his role is going to be. When you watch that compared to his tape, I wasn't impressed when I watched him. I was more impressed when I saw him make plays when I watched Metcalf and Brown's tape, which got me hyped for him, and I was just left not in a great mood after watching him, and that's why I have him ranked so low. I don't know what his role is going to be on the next level.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. Everything he saw, I saw. I thought it was a really good synopsis. Lodge is my 23rd ranked wide receiver out of 24.
Oof.
I call him this year as Kalen Ballage because last year I was high on. No, I'm not saying that because of the same player, but because I was the only one on the show high on a player, and I got shit on for liking him.
Oh, so this is what I'm gonna be the only one that's here behind. I get it now.
Yeah.
That's why it's not. Lodge, and I'm gonna get shit on. Got it.
That's the only reason.
Got it. All right, I believe that wraps up the guys that we wanted to talk about is under the radar people. I'm going to go ahead and reveal the Beerfield Fantasy Football Consensus Rankings. If you're watching on YouTube, you will have a graphic right now. So our consensus number 1, this is number 1 through 4 were all chalk. N'Keal Harry, AJ Brown, Hakeem Butler, DK Metcalf. After that, Miles Boykin, Kelvin Harmon came in. I believe that did go to a tiebreaker, which was our total. Again, we rate guys 1 through 9, and then we on a bunch of different categories, and then average that together and adjust as we see fit. Miles Boykin did beat out Kelvin Harmon slightly when you added Dan and I's composite score together. After that, JJ Arcega, Whiteside, Stanley Morgan, they were in a literal tie. Andy Isabella, Paris Campbell. There is one guy we did not get to talk about who's our number 11. We'll talk about him after I'm done reading this list. Marquise Brown comes in as our number 12. So, Dan, let's talk about our number 11. And I faded him because I thought I was too high on him, and then you came in equally as high on this guy as well. And I'm so happy you did because we might be the only people singing his praises. I've seen Matt's review on Twitter with this gentleman who thinks that Matt decidedly thinks he is just average. I disagree with that. Let's talk David Sills, who deserves a spot on this episode.
We'll let you go with this one because he was your one of 2 early man crushers for the wide receiver position.
Yes, he absolutely was. So 2 years, 24 games, 132 receptions, over 2,000 yards and 35 touchdowns. Last season, 65 receptions, 986 yards, and 15 touchdowns. 6'3", 211. He's a former quarterback, but both seasons at wide receiver yielded over 980 yards and over 15 touchdowns. Some guys that have compiled 2,000 yards, 30 touchdowns in under 30 games. There are 6 total, but Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Crabtree, and Devontae Adams are all included in that list. And I don't know if you've heard those guys' names or not, but I think they did pretty okay at the NFL level.
Nope, never heard of him.
For a former quarterback, I thought David Sills ran a pretty good route tree. He uses head fakes and good footwork to gain positioning. He uses his frame to box out defenders and position well. He's able to find soft spots in zones and work himself open, which I think is attributed to being a former quarterback. He's a mauler as a blocker, adept in the end zone. He plays mostly outside, but he did go into some slot as well. But I think his frame really does position him to be a number 2, almost Jordy Nelson type of receiver. Some concerns about his overall athleticism. He didn't really burn anyone or show great agility or leaping ability, although his combine was not terrible. He did have a sub 7.3 cone, 4.57 40, not great, not the worst. I think smarter NFL corners might create a little bit of an issue for him as far as separating, and that he probably is best suited from his skill set as a huge slot guy. Also did have some drop problems, but David Sills is a late convert that I think a lot of people are going to miss out on.
Yeah, he's a Cooper Kupp comparison, and not just because he's white, but because he's a bigger possession slot receiver who may not have the speed quite enough to play on the outside. But I think his agility
not
looked
just
a lot
because
better.
he's white.
Not just because he's white.
Listen, there's people out there that,
right. He's like, damn it, he's going to New England.
Hey, at least it wasn't the Wes Welker comparison.
there's real people out there, man.
I love it. But anyways, I agree with pretty much everything Hopper just said here. I think the fact because he was converted to QB, he does show some of that instincts to work back to the QB on his comeback routes or when the play breaks down. Given the fact that he was a converted QB receiver, he does have his drop issues. As Hopper mentioned, 15 drops over his last 2 seasons, 9.7% drop rate in his final one. I believe he can get a little bit better as a route runner, and I think when he moves to the slot where I think he needs to be successful, there may be some growing pains with him. I would like for him to put on a little bit more muscle because he has a bit of a tiny frame, but he shows the willingness to work over the middle, and I think his short area quickness, which will allow him to create separation early on in those short routes, will find him being successful, at least on an NFL level. Maybe not so much on a fantasy level right away, but there's upside there.
Matt,
Yeah.
anything to add with David Sills?
I have a very different opinion on David Sills.
Don't agree with us.
So I mentioned DeMarcus Lodge was my 23 out of 24. David Sills is number 24.
I think it's very bold of you to show up on this show and admit you're wrong ahead of time.
Listen, I'm just here to make you guys look smarter, right? Isn't that why you would bring me on?
You got a much, much larger task ahead of you to make Dan and I look smart.
Yeah, right.
Here's the thing about David Sills. It takes him a long time to get going downfield. Like, this guy really does not accelerate well. I do think he has a good route tree. I agree. I think that is his strong suit. But to me, he plays in the role he played in West Virginia. He played like an X. And I think with his body size and the way that he approaches the game, that's probably where he would have to play in the NFL. But I don't think he can extend his body. I think he's rigid. I don't think he's elusive. And he just doesn't come off with any kind of dominating features to me. And so it's just a huge jag alert, or, just another guy alert. And the thing that really, really dropped him in my rankings, I know you guys both alluded to it, I could not get over the dropped balls. I really couldn't, because he was dropping contested passes. He was dropping uncontested passes. And every time I thought I saw him do something good that I liked, it was followed by a dropped ball. It was just so frustrating to watch his tape. Didn't really engage in blocking, wasn't physical with defenders. And so, that drops him in my rankings as well. I can't see a path for him to contribute at the NFL level.
Boom.
But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion.
That's just one man's opinion.
One outnumbered man currently.
Yeah, you are outnumbered on that one, because especially the blocker take. I thought that, look, there is a fear that I have with him, which is why I faded him at the end, is he could be Jake Weineke. of last year. He's a guy that
I
I
think,
was high
like-
on and didn't really develop into anything.
He reminds me of like the well liquor version of Mike Evans. Maybe I'm just alluding back to our previous recording, but
Which is a much better recording than this one. by the
Yes,
way.
yes. Well, at least it's a lot more entertaining.
It's a lot more entertaining than this one's been.
Yes.
that's actually how the show concept started. Is because it wasn't David Sills. I called Demaria Crockett a well liquor version of Le'Veon Bell, and that's kind of like how this whole thing is sprung out. So
I think
that
Demaria
is
Crockett
the
got
that I have trademarked, the well liquor version.
Yeah, Demaria Crockett is well liquor is putting it nicely. Anyway, that's it. That's our show. Let's go ahead and wrap this up real quick. Dan, and Matt, I guess I'll include you in this as well. Name 2 guys that you're targeting outside of kind of that top 4, and 2 guys you're avoiding. So, Dan, who are you? I read the wrong line there. I'm gonna start over. This is why we don't edit, because I just
Rewind.
I completely read the note that was for the people doing the show, not the one that was actually for the intro to this segment. So just pretend like none of that happened. 2 guys in your top 12 that have the highest bust potential. What threw me off that I was reading the wrong line was 2 guys that you outside of your top tier that you liked, and the first guy I had listed was DK Metcalf, which is not the case.
No.
So who are 2 guys that you're avoiding, Dan? Or that you
I
think
put
have-
down Metcalf because I think he is the biggest boom bust receiver in this class, and I also put down Butler because of his his likely rookie draft capital, and the fact that both of these guys could very well not live up to what they are being drafted as. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I think those are the 2 likely outcomes of our top 12.
Matt, who do you got? Who are 2 guys that you think have a very high bust potential?
In the top 12?
Yeah, in your top 12.
In my top 12, I mean, obviously DK has high ceiling, high bust. I'll add Emmanuel Hall into that as well.
Okay. And yeah, I've got DK as well as a high ceiling, high bust type of guy. Miles Boykin's the other one I have. He's a lot like DK in the sense of where he destroyed the combine, didn't have a ton of college production, had some injuries, and has some red flags. So I think that those 2 are actually real close to each other. And 2 guys that you are most excited about. Matt, I'll go ahead and start with you. Who are 2 guys that you're targeting and are super excited about in this?
I know we talked about him earlier, but I do expect to have 500 shares of Jalen Hurd. I'm not sure I'm in that many leagues, but I'll figure out a way to make
You'll find a way to make it happen.
On top of that, I will say that a guy who I don't think we've talked about. Have we talked about Deebo Samuel?
He's on my list.
He's
but
on
no.
Dan's list, but no, that'll be
I love Deebo
He
Samuel.
fell outside of the consensus top 12, so that'll be a next episode thing.
I'm not sure if the price will be right, but if he ends up in the right landing spot, I think Deebo could be an absolute PPR machine. And so
I want him to go to the Colts.
The Colts,
The Colts is the spot where I want him to land in the most.
I mean, that would be fantastic with Andrew Luck. It sounds weird, but I think he's a perfect fit in Oakland. I really do. Playing in the slot in Oakland with AB and Williams on the outside, opening things up for him. Oh man, I think he could actually make.
But why would you wish Derek Carr on him?
I haven't fully given up on Derek Carr. So
All right, Dan, who do you got?
I put down N'Keal Harry, just because I think he's the best receiver in this class, and I think wherever he lands, it's not going to matter much for me in terms of if he moves on enough. And then Stanley Morgan Jr., just because I can't get enough of him.
Yep. I went a little different from you. First off, I 100% agree with both of your picks. And Stanley Morgan Jr. is a guy I've been high on since before it was his draft class. Like if I was playing Devy, which I've not had the balls to do yet, Stanley Morgan Jr. would have been a pick for me.
Probably.
Yo, let's do a startup Devy league, man.
I don't know.
I'm not in
I don't.
Devy league.
I don't know Devy well enough to where I feel confident doing one.
I'd do it, but I'd be very, very, very.
Well, how are you going to learn?
overwhelmed.
Play, man.
I'd be bad about it. Well, it's not a learning thing. It's a fact that I know how to learn for that. I just don't want to commit the time to watching players that are still in college and not in a draft class yet.
Oh, that's fair. You want to make sure you can commit to the
Yep.
changing your lineups and all that good stuff.
Yep. Now, AJ Brown, Marquise Brown are the two that I had listed down as guys that I'm excited about. AJ Brown, obviously, we talked about his high floor. I think that he lands in the right spot. He's a contributor from the outset and continues to be a contributor for a long time to come. Even though the upside's less, I think that he has the potential to be a year in, year out wide receiver one. And then Marquise Brown is another guy that I put down just because of what happens if he lands in an offense that uses him right and he can stay healthy. He does have some explosiveness to him, even though he is also high bust. That comes with an asterisk of, look, I'll target him, but I'm not going to target him until it's the right time to target him.
He's kind of like Antonio Callaway if
That's a good
he had his
comparison.
injury concerns just because of how good he could be if he didn't have, his off the field and with Brown with the injuries.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, that's all we got. Thank you for tuning in. This was a longer episode. It's the first time we've had 3 people on the entire draft season, so apologize for that. But a lot to cover with the wide receiver class. Next episode, we'll cover the back end. It'll be a little shorter because I think we covered most of the talent in this class.
Yep.
At least in this episode. Thank you again, Matt Hicks of the Fantasy FANalysts podcast for joining us. Matt, one more time, where can they find you and your content?
On Twitter at the FF_educator. Again, mostly writing for the FFAnalyst.com. Also the Gridiron Experts. Dropping a new podcast this week as well, the Dynasty Draft Room, which will be released as part of the Gridiron Experts podcast network. So go ahead, check that out if you like my takes on these rookies. If you don't, then still listen.
We expect you there anyways.
Also, be sure to check out our guest spot on the Fantasy FANalysts podcast. It was, again, one of the more fun episodes that we've ever done. So be sure to tune into that when that does drop.
I rarely listen back just because I don't know. I don't love like self-scouting myself on podcast. I cannot wait to listen to that episode.
I was actually, when I walked out between recording that and recording this, I told my fiance that that's what I'm going to have to listen back to, and I don't listen back to a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
I will apologize for not being as prepared as these guys, but I did.
Dan, you were good. Stop beating up on yourself.
You were fine.
No, I wanted to be better.
April 25th, don't forget, we will be doing a live stream during the first round of the NFL draft. We'll have guests, we'll have friends, we'll have alcohol. Dan and I will be in the same place. We'll be giving you all the analysis we can possibly give you. Next week, wide receiver part 2. I'm at Hot BFF with 2 P's. He's at Theory BFF with 2 F's. You can find the show Beerfield Fantasy on YouTube and Facebook, Beerfield FF, Twitter, Instagram, Untapped. We will catch you guys next week.
Next time
on Beerfield's Fantasy Football.
Peace.
See ya.